if you're looking at environmental impact from a climate change perspective, and certainly many other environmental impact categories, virgin fiber can often have a lower impact. And that has to do with a couple things. There are really two main factors. One of them is being able to use renewable biomass in your production. And then the second one is...
You're about to hear something that goes against everything you've ever been told in sustainability meetings. What if I told you that virgin fiber packaging can be even more sustainable than recycled material? In this episode of Packaging Unboxd, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood and, let's be honest, one of the most controversial topics in our industry, the true environmental impact of virgin versus recycled fiber. Our guest, Nate Pachka from Metsä Board, is going to break down all the information with hard data, and he's got some pretty hot takes as well. You're going to learn a couple things. Why virgin fiber may actually lower your carbon footprint thanks to those fossil-free energy and serious lightweighting options that recycled board just can't touch. Why burning wood waste might be cleaner than your recycled packaging, and how biomass energy from forest leftovers doesn't add new carbon to the atmosphere. Sounds like that has nothing to do with packaging, but trust me, it's got so much to do with it. It literally blows my mind in this episode. You're also going to learn about how European regulations are about to require traceability all the way back to the tree where that box was made from, literally to the forest plot. So if you're not planning for those types of regulations, you definitely need to stick around. And last, definitely wait till the end, because I get the courage to ask one of the stupidest questions I think I've been afraid to ask for a really long time. You are welcome. Because God, I hope somebody else had the same question I did, but check it out. And if you've ever sat in a sustainability meeting and thought, this feels more like PR than science, this is for you. Let's get into it. Let's get to the show. Today, we've got Nate Pachka from Metsä Board. We're going to get into sustainability, different materials, and kind of the stuff that you guys are doing. So, Nate, what's up, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, super excited. So, before we get started, what is Metsä and what makes you guys different?
Sure. So, we are Metsä Board. We're a paperboard producer out of Finland. We've got 7 mills in Finland and 1 in Sweden. And we produce folding boxboard, so FBB, which is not quite as common of a grade in North America, but it is pretty much the predominant grade in Europe and in APAC. So we're really trying to bring that over to the Americas. And we also produce liner board. We're actually the biggest producer of white top kraft liner in the world, and that gets also used globally. So I think we're in about 100 different countries, and I'd say that the one thing that kind of sets us apart as a company is that we are basically a part of Metsä Group as our parent company. And our sister companies, Metsä Forest, Metsä Wood, Metsä Fiber, Metsä Tissue, they kind of use the rest of the tree. So Metsä Forest, they take care of the harvesting of the raw material. Metsä Wood, they take the larger parts of the tree and turn them into building materials. Metsä Fiber sells pulp on the market. Metsä Tissue does greaseproof papers, and then we make paperboard. And our parent company is owned by a cooperative of over 90,000 private Finnish forest owners. So it's basically, and that's where we get about 60% of our total raw material. So our owners have a lot of incentive to take care of their forest because they're shareholders, and then it gets used to create our product.
Most paper companies don't own a forest, right? Is that safe to say?
Yes, that's really safe to say. Even in the EU, even a lot of our kind of competitors and those who are doing a lot of same stuff as we're doing in the area, they don't have that similar model. So it's a very unique value chain where we're kind of vertically integrated upstream.
Can you give us just a brief understanding of what even EUDR is for anybody that's listening that can't spell EUDR?
Yeah, sure. And it's something that I've been getting a lot of questions about here in the Americas, but certainly a lot more in the EU. It is the EU deforestation regulation. It is going into effect at the end of this year. It was actually supposed to start at the beginning of this year, but it got pushed back a year. And it's essentially trying to make sure that there's no products coming in or out of the EU that are connected to deforestation or unethical forestry practices. And so it's a big, long traceability system that is being set up to ensure that we can trace our wood raw material and other raw materials that are forest related all the way back to their origins.
Okay. So like I should be able to geolocate the tree that went into making this board.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's intended to be to the plot level. So,
Sure.
you have basically, you harvest the wood from the forest. There's a number, essentially, a reference number attached to that batch, and that number will follow through the rest of the value chain so that ultimately at the end, you can go back and trace those reference numbers back to the specific plot where the tree was harvested.
And then you've got, so that's EUDR, deforestation regulation in Europe. Then you've got EPR in the US, which is completely different. But I'm hearing from customers, from brands, and they're kind of confusing the two. And I think maybe just because they start with
lots of E's.
Can you explain EPR and how that's different?
Sure. EPR is the extended producer responsibility. It's actually a regulation that's been in place in Europe for quite a long time now, and they're refining it and changing it year over year. And it exists in Canada, but it is particularly growing a lot of steam here in the US. 3 states are mandating reporting starting this year: Colorado, California, and Oregon. And essentially what it's aiming to do is to kind of put the responsibility, both financial and physical, logistical, on the producer for end-of-life treatment. So whether it's going to be different fees that are assessed to different types of packaging based on essentially their end-of-life treatment, how difficult it is to recycle them, how difficult it is to treat them at the end of life. The harder it is, the more challenging it is, the higher the fee that will be assessed to that packaging. And so it is intended to make producers start making more sustainable packaging that is easier to treat at end of life.
So then you've got EUDR, European deforestation, helps kind of narrow down where the tree came from so we don't deforest, areas, because we're seeing that happening. I mean, we've been seeing that happening for a long time. You've got EPR, extended producer responsibility, which now is just basically going to fine you if you're putting more materials into the system that are difficult to recycle, right? So kind of moving you more into like mono-material, paper-based packaging, which is going to be the highest recycled material. Yeah. So with lightweighting and kind of getting into the design side of sustainable packaging, a lot of times designers they're going to default right to recycled material because they think it's recycled. It's gone through. It's more sustainable. There's a better story there. Can you break down why maybe that's not the right direction, or maybe why that's not always true? Because this gets to be a little controversial. If you're like, what do you mean you don't want to use recycled material? All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod.
Yeah, no, it's a battle I fight every day pretty much as a virgin fiber paperboard producer. We don't have any recycled content in any of our grades. That would be, particularly challenging for us to do, obviously given the setup of our mills, but also in a small country like Finland where there's not a ton of recycled material. We'd have to ship it in from the rest of the world, and that could be costly. So I think I want to preface this by saying that I would never say that recycled material is bad, right? It's good. We support it. We want our products to be recycled as many times as possible. We want them to live the longest life they can live, and we promote the circular economy for sure. But I think that there needs to be understanding that there's two different ways to look at sustainability. There's the circular economy view of it, where we should continue to use fibers as much as possible, right? And that's maybe a brand that wants to use recycled fiber that would kind of align with them. But if you're looking at environmental impact from a climate change perspective, and certainly many other environmental impact categories, virgin fiber can often have a lower impact. And that has to do with a couple things. There are really 2 main factors. One of them is being able to use renewable biomass in your production. if you are a virgin fiber producer, you have side streams from your pulping process, from your harvesting process, and from your manufacturing that you can take and throw in your boiler and use as production energy. For example, we're 90% fossil free right now, and almost 80% of that is coming from biomass that we get from side streams. If you're a recycled producer, you don't have that same luxury. And so in most cases, you're really just relying on fossil fuels to produce your products. Many, of course, are trying to use as much biomass or other renewable energies as they can, but of course, it's a really energy intensive process. So sometimes you're not getting as much energy as you need from those sources of energy. So that's the first one. And then the second one is the lightweighting. So recycled board, because it's made from recycled fibers, which have been oftentimes recycled over and over and over again, they're smaller, they're weaker, less integral, so you need more of them. So recycled packaging, paperboard packaging, tends to be heavier. And so as you can probably assume, a heavier package, that means, per carton, more emissions in transportation. At end of life, more emissions created if it's landfilled or incinerated. So with both of those two factors, if you're looking at a virgin fiber paperboard, you can use less raw material. So you can reduce your carbon footprint by the combination of using fossil-free materials, fossil-free energy sources in your production, and trying to use as little raw material as possible in lightweighting. And that's something that virgin fiber can do really, really well. And recycled fiber can't quite do quite as well. And again, it doesn't mean we should switch over to virgin fiber. It just means that they coexist, and you need them both to totally achieve a circular economy. I mean, we can't recycle everything, right? The recycling rate for paperboard packaging right now in the US specifically is usually around 60%, depending on who you ask. So clearly we need to supplement and replenish what's lost in the recycling loop, but also fortify what's there with stronger fibers so that we can use less fibers in that recycled packaging. So that's why it's good to inject those virgin fibers into the recycling loop to replenish what's lost and also fortify what's there.
So you said a few different things in there that I think are really important and maybe easy to lose track of. So the first portion of that was on the energy required. With recycled, you're using whatever that energy source is to basically just run the equipment, right? Because you're not doing it. You're not milling it. You're just repulping, destroying, going through that whole process. Yeah, like all those different steps to get it to something that's usable. And then if you're trying to get like a white paper out of that stuff, you've got the bleaching. Like there's a lot that goes in there. And I know with like white recycled paper is a little bit more difficult now than it used to be, right? Because in the past, before people worked from home, you would work in an office, be a ton of white photocopier paper basically getting recycled, and that was going into the waste stream, and that was turning into recycled white paper. We don't do a lot of that anymore. It's a lot of mixed materials, so you're getting not the cleanest whites. So now it requires a little bit more processing. But with you, in order to create this first run virgin fiber, the energy that you're using is renewable. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, and that's actually another misconception, because I mentioned that we're using biomass, renewable biomass for our energy production. So, I'm sure you've all, had a campfire before where you burn logs, you see smoke go into the air, there are emissions. But the carbon that wood is releasing is the same carbon that tree had sequestered from the atmosphere when it was growing. So you're not adding any new carbon to the atmosphere. You're just putting carbon back into that same carbon cycle. So that's why when we say that when we use renewable biomass, we're using wood side streams from our process. That's still renewable energy. You're not adding any carbon to the atmosphere. So that's why it's considered renewable. And I think that's something that some people tend to, misinterpret, or sometimes people have a different understanding or a different point of view on that. And that's totally understandable. But the fact of the matter is, if you're using these side streams as biomass, that is considered renewable energy.
That stuff would essentially go to waste otherwise.
Exactly.
Right. So you're using it to create the energy. Yeah, you've collected, X amount of carbon, but you're just putting it back in, and then you'll basically you'll recollect that anyway because you've got your own forest. Right. So that part's a little bit different, I think, in terms of like what you can understand from a design perspective of why maybe that makes more sense to go down that path, if it makes sense for your brand. But then the second part of that was on the fiber lengths and the material weight, which honestly, as a designer, I never really thought about that. Right. So if I'm using recycled, that stuff's been pulped, repulped a million times. The fibers could have been long from the beginning. They've just gotten shorter and shorter, which means the board gets weaker and weaker. So in order to make it as strong as I need it to be, I need to now go with a thicker board, which is going to be heavier. And again, it's like super basic, makes total sense, but completely never think about it. Right. Because you're like, oh no, this is recycled. The board feels fine. Let's go. But you're saying I can go with a thinner, lighter board that's going to be equally as dense and strong if I go virgin. And it's not for every application, but if I'm looking to lightweight, then maybe going virgin would make sense, or increasing the amount of virgin fiber in that material.
Yeah. I mean, and you said kind of a key thing there, about specific end uses.
If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. SpecRite is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong.
There are end uses that are better for virgin, and there are end uses that are more suited for recycled, especially with respect to consumer safety, right? With virgin, you know exactly where it's coming from. You know exactly what's in it. So there is less risk going with a virgin fiber for safety critical end uses like food, like anything for babies or for women who are pregnant, or anything of that nature. That way you have absolute certainty where the fibers are coming from, and there's no potential for anything to leach into the final product. And where recycled fibers are great for nearly every other application. The other thing I want to comment on based on what you just said was, it doesn't always mean that the virgin fiber will be a thinner board. For example, FBB, that's what we produce, and a lot of our European and APAC competitors do the same thing. That tends to be a slightly thicker board, but there's this middle layer, at least in ours, that's called bleached chemithermal-mechanical pulp, and it's kind of like airy. It's a little fluffy. And so you get the bulk and you get the stiffness without compromising any weight. So you're going to get that lightweighting effect. And that's the case for not just our FBB, but many FBBs. They're not always thinner, but they're typically, I don't want to say all the time, but typically lighter. And if you look at like the GSM, which, in the US, I find that, most people go by caliper. So if you have this caliper of recycled, that must be the same caliper for FBB. So and that's just what we're going to do. And that's the grade that we should look at. Well, that's not always the case. You can up caliper to get that same CD stiffness and still get a significant lightweighting advantage.
So if I'm doing, let's say like a 1 mil caliper recycled versus a 1 mil virgin FBB, like they'll be the same. They'll be the same thickness, but the weight will be different.
Yes,
between the two. Yeah. Well, what kind of a weight reduction would we be expecting?
I mean, I can comment on our products. Typically, when we do our FBB versus a recycled grade, you're looking at about a 16% reduction in total weight, which ends up, being quite a lot. That's a lot more cartons that you're able to produce per ton. And as many customers buy based on ton. So if you're purchasing it, there's also a cost advantage to it as well as the lightweighting and reduction in carbon footprint.
Okay. So again, going back to the designer's focused on the structure, the product protection. Then you've got like the visual designers that are worried about like the way the graphics are going to appear on the outside of this packaging, making sure the colors match, all that good stuff. You're not thinking, well, if I choose this material, it's going to be 16% lighter. When they go to buy it and they're buying, 4 or 5 tons of this paper, like there's going to be a cost reduction. And then of course, if we're shipping it on rolls, then it's like, all the different things that kind of ladder out of that. But if you're a designer and you really want, like, I don't know. For me, like I focus in on all of these details on the weight, the material, like where's the material coming from, like getting that deep into it to make better decisions for customers. But if you're on the design side, you're not doing that. Like this is a good opportunity to kind of learn about that, right? So asking where's your material coming from? How much lighter is it? What kind of volumes are they doing so that you can figure out how much tonnage is going to be required? This isn't something I'm saying like a designer should know. You can reach out to the manufacturer. You can reach out to the paper company. You can just throw out, hey, when you're talking to the customer, we could take a look at Metsä. We can bring them in and have them let us know if they're a good fit for this project or what kind of savings we can get. So besides like lightweighting, which is, we're not really lightweighting, we're just swapping materials if we're just doing that. And we are getting that lightweighting benefit. What other benefits are there to, let's say, moving a product from a recycled board, let's in the freezer section, to a Metsä board?
I am the sustainability manager of Metsä Board Americas, right? I've got a team over in Finland that helps me out. And they take care of EMEA and APAC. I take care of the Americas. And we also have a team here of technical service people that are way better at understanding the specific technical details of our paperboard than I am. But from my understanding, aside from that lightweighting, aside from that carbon footprint reduction, which is, those are pretty much the two biggest factors that FBB has to offer. You also get a lot better runnability in a lot of cases. And there are a lot of cases where you get much more consistent fibers, which means a lot more consistency throughout the converting process. So that is typically where an FBB will excel. Environmental impact, runnability, and consistency in fiber quality.
Okay. And then I also see you guys have a couple of studies that are claiming like a 60% carbon footprint reduction. I don't know if it's creative or just marketing or just people in general at this point, right? Like we're always wary of greenwashing. Like what's the angle here? So like what did you compare and how can we explain those numbers to somebody that's skeptical?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why we conducted these studies, we've done a couple of them, but this latest one that you're referring to for food packaging, we wanted to kind of address a lot of the, I don't want to say misinformation, but we wanted to educate people on virgin fibers and that you shouldn't always just immediately assume that a recycled fiber is going to be more sustainable. So in this particular study, we used kind of a box for tea bags as the case study. And we compared our Metsä Board Classic FBB to white line chipboard, which is kind of the terminology for recycled fiber in the EU. And so we found that due to the fact that if you look at the averages between different regions, and we use the EU as an average, producers of recycled fiber are using a lot more fossil fuels in their production, and the boards are typically much, much heavier. So due to those two factors, that's where we found this 65% reduction comparing our board to recycled board. And also because, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are 90% fossil free in our production because we take advantage of all our side streams. That's where the biggest difference is. It's that cradle to gate comparison that we really excel in.
Okay. And then when we're talking like food packaging specifically, there's always going to be some kind of, if we're in the freezer aisle, right, we're going to need some kind of a barrier, whether it's to protect the food or protect the board from condensation. What kind of barriers does Metsä offer? Does that then lean into the sustainability story here?
Yeah. I mean, kind of the $1 million question right now in the whole industry is trying to create the best barrier possible, right, for paperboard packaging that can really withstand moisture and grease like plastic can. We do offer PE coated grades, but those are all going to be phased out by 2030. One of our goals is to get rid of all fossil-based materials in our packaging. But we have another product called Metsä Board Prime FBB EB. And this is a dispersion barrier coating that we use, and it's got medium grease and water resistance. So it's great for It's great for bakery items. It's great for frozen food. And it's completely home compostable, recyclable. It is basically the same types of materials are used to create this barrier as you would see in any kind of paperboard coating. So, we're constantly trying to evolve and find new solutions. And this is one area where we're really trying to improve this particular grade. But it's something that we came up with several years ago, and it seems to be delighting a lot of our customers. And it's a great way to get away from PE and move over to this non-fossil based dispersion barrier.
Is it still a plastic?
No, it's not considered plastic. You'd have to look at, it's very difficult in EU, right? There's a lot of specific regulations. They have specific language. If you look at the ISO definition of plastic, it's definitely not plastic. And as I mentioned, it's tested as home compostable, BPI, DIN-CERTCO. It is not plastic. It's essentially made from the same materials that you would find in the coating of any paperboard. So we found a way. Our R&D team is fantastic over in Finland. They found a way to figure out this formulation that would not necessitate the use of any kind of plastic.
Okay, and then you said the barriers are essentially not as strong as some of the materials that are not compostable that are petroleum based, but that's going to be because they're petroleum based, right? It's like the one conversation I seem to always be having with brands and creatives is that sustainability is a trade-off. You can't make a compostable board that has the barrier properties of petroleum without the trade-off of maybe it's, performance, essentially. Like, really, that's what we're saying is this is not going to perform as well as a petroleum product, but it's going to perform well enough for what you need and then give you that compostability.
Yeah. We're, like I said, we're all kind of looking for the silver bullet here. And we all hope that the development continues and that the technology continues to advance. And I know it will. And, we're doing our best. All our competitors are doing their best as well. The best we can do right now is what we have and just make sure we pick applications where it's going to work. We always advocate for testing. Make sure it works. And if it doesn't, then we understand. Like, you got to have something that keeps that grease and water out. And, hopefully, as we move on here, our recycling system continues to grow and in a way it can accept products and maybe some PE coated grades can be recycled in more material recycling or material recovery facilities across the country. But right now, I think that's the biggest issue is it doesn't feel right to put PE coated paperboard on the market when, and this is a personal opinion, not necessarily that of Metsä's. It feels wrong to do that if it's not going to be recycled properly or not always going to be able to get through that MRF.
If we go back to EPR, then if you got these petroleum base liners, is that going to be impacted by EPR?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is. Those paperboards that have the PE barrier are going to have a higher fee than those that do not have it. And there's a bunch of different factors that go into that. Weight is another one. So if you can reduce raw material and lightweight, you're paying a fee per ton, and then you're paying additional fees for materials that are considered, I suppose, unsustainable, for lack of a better way to describe it. And PE coated boards, those will carry a higher fee.
Yeah. Do you know off the top of your head, and you may not, like what the fees are today in, let's say, Oregon?
I know that Oregon, I just saw recently that they came out with maybe a first draft of the fee structure. I don't remember what the numbers were. If I remember correctly, they're quite punitive. So it's definitely a brand's best interest to pay close attention to that and to start thinking about it. I don't think California and Colorado have done their fee structure yet. Don't quote me as of the time of this recording. I haven't checked in a little while, but it's going to be punitive. It's going to be something that's going to hurt the wallets of brands.
Yeah, I heard. I was having a conversation with Corey Connors this morning, and He's based in Oregon. He has the Sustainable Packaging podcast, and he meant, if I remember correctly, I think it was like $1.20 a pound or something like that, which is insane.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's correct. So I don't know if I remember correctly. That is insane.
Yes. Yeah. And every time I go into a customer, I mention EPR, and I would venture to say that, most, 80% of the people that I speak to at our customers aren't really aware of the EPR regulation, and how punitive it's going to be. And so by teaching them about that and helping them understand what can help them reduce their fees, I think that's a really important part of my job. And I'm really glad that, certainly us at Metsä, we're able to help customers reduce those fees.
We covered virgin, we covered recycling, composting. I know in the US, like, composting isn't huge, right? As much as we'd love it to be, it just isn't. I know there's a lot of brands out there that are doing compostable packaging, but usually when we talk about compostable packaging, it's going to be plastics that have additives in them. And that's like the last thing that composters want. I've had a bunch of composters on, like the last thing we want to do is put plastic in our stuff, because there's no way to check it. Compostable and non-compostable plastic look exactly the same. Yeah. So like they have to manually go through, and essentially they just usually pull it out because they don't know what's going to go in there. And if they're selling their product as like organic soil or organic material, makes it really difficult. When it comes to paper, that's a little bit easier because you're not making that big comparison. So having like a BPI icon on there that says this has been certified, its paper, makes it a little bit simpler. Then when we get into like some of these coatings, doing a non-petroleum based coating makes it a little bit simpler. That will break down. It won't break down into microplastics. So we'd get into like more organic material.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, the recycling or the composting infrastructure in the US, it's tough. I mean, most consumers, they love to recycle. They would prefer to compost. Most people really truly are altruistic in what they want to do with disposing things ethically. I live in New York City, and for us, it's actually pretty nice. We just recently, all buildings were mandated to have composting in buildings. So my wife and I, we collect all of our food scraps after every meal, put them in a bag in the freezer, and then we bring them downstairs into the basement and compost. So systems like that hopefully will continue to kind of hit other cities. I know there are other cities who are doing similar things. But when it comes to paperboard packaging, what's nice about what we do here in New York is that we do accept paper packaging. And so it's really important that if you are a paperboard producer or you're a brand trying to like figure out how you can best reduce the end of life impact of your packaging, the compostability and the recyclability are important, right? Because if you have a takeout box made out of paperboard and it's recyclable, but you had some greasy sandwich or something, and it's just that package is, there's no way it would get accepted by a MRF. If it's compostable as well, you can just compost it. That's why it's really good to have compostability as your backup. It's when those fibers can't be used again and can't be recycled, that's where compostability comes in. You can make sure that package continues to have a useful end of life.
Where in New York are you?
I'm on the Upper East Side.
Okay. So this has nothing to do with paper. I'm just being nosy. Like, I lived in Queens. We had the chute. You dump your stuff and you open the chute and you drop it, and then like you never see your trash ever again until it's up on the street and the guys are striking and you see that trash pile up. Yeah. What are you doing with composting? So like you can freeze your stuff and you go to the basement, and what happens? Like, is there just like a big bin of everybody's organic waste?
Yes.
Or what does that look like?
There's just a big bin in our basement of organic waste. And it goes to an industrial composter. Okay. We've had other programs.
You guys are collecting compost. Yes. You guys aren't composting in the basement. Right?
No, we don't have like a garden in the basement. Though that would be cool. And actually, like, jokes aside, a lot of the compost that was being collected previously, and I would need to look into it with this new composting regulation, but a lot of it goes to the gardens all throughout New York. So it's used as fertilizer, and that's why they're doing it, and they get a pretty good useful life out of it, because there's a lot of, I know it's a concrete jungle, but there's a lot of greenery here that needs that fertilizer.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
I had not heard about that program, because I always assume, and that's the problem, right? I was like, you don't dig in, you just can make assumptions. Like, I assumed in New York, it's going to be the hardest place to compost, right? Because you don't have anywhere to compost. Like, where are you going to do it? Nobody's got room in their, on their fire escape to start composting.
Yeah, I think there are those like really small like composting units you can put on your countertop, and those are typically expensive. And like, again, when you make the dirt, like, do you have a plant on your fire escape, hopefully, or just dump it in the nearest like green area? I'm not sure, but I think why New York is a good place for this is because wherever you go, it's pretty convenient to drop something in the composting. If it's right in your basement, it's right there. And if you're composting in a rural area, you have to kind of handle that yourself. And I think in a city like New York, it's just a lot easier to be more convenient for the consumer who's doing the composting. I think that's where we kind of found a way to make this successful.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. And I know it kind of took a left turn here. I just wanted to figure out, like, how's it work? I'm in Arizona, and we don't even compost out here. It's like impossible to compost unless you do it yourself.
It's tough.
It's not easy. And I mean, recycling is not easy either. So just like adding one more layer of complexity. Yeah. So with the boards, I know you guys did like the world's lightest pizza box, which kind of goes back to your product having that airy middle, being light, but having the long fibers, which makes it strong. And I think you guys cut like almost 40% of the weight, right? So again, if you're a designer out there, like, reach out to Metsä, figure out how they can help reduce your weight, lightweight, make things more easily recyclable, and how maybe virgin fiber makes sense for you. Is there anything maybe we didn't cover that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Have you ever wondered, how do I reduce my carbon footprint? Should I focus on recycled content or reducing weight first? Which design strategies are the most effective for my products? Triac offers multiple solutions for lifecycle assessment, goals management, reporting, EPR fees, and more. Visit triac.com to connect with our team and register for a free 10-day trial of Eco Impact Compass to get started today.
I mean, I think we covered everything I would have wanted to cover. I'll just say one more thing, and I think I thought of this earlier when you said something. I can't remember what it was that put this through my head, but I think, you mentioned something about talking to your mill. If you're a brand owner, if you're a designer, talk to your mill about what's going on with their production process, how their board is made. I think that was a really good point, because I'm not the only one who is kind of the sustainability person for the mill, who is just trying to educate people downstream about sustainability, about product choice. And I really do try to go into every conversation without like an explicit bias on, our products are virgin fiber. I try to give everybody all of the information and just kind of be a thought leader so that people can understand how to make informed decisions. So I think it is an important point you made. Make sure that you do talk to the mill and get an understanding of where they're coming from, understand their process, and just, I think at the end of the day, if you understand further back in your value chain, right, you're mitigating risk. If you know what your supplier is doing and you have a supplier who's doing things responsibly, ethically, sustainably, that's going to pay dividends for you in the long run, because you're going to reduce risk of compliance errors, reputational risk, even financial risk, right? So I just want to touch on that. And I thought that was a good point that you'd made earlier about that.
What's one question about paperboard sustainability that nobody ever asks, but they absolutely should?
I don't think enough people ask me about, like, what is the total environmental impact of this package? It is just, give me your numbers, kind of, they're trying to check boxes. But I think that it would be awesome if I had a lot of customers like you who are asking questions about, all right, why would you not produce recycled fiber? Why is virgin fiber, like, just explain to me specifically why that would be better, the same, worse, just so that we all have a better understanding. It's just, I just think raising the knowledge base and the educational level of everybody, it's challenging to do. Everybody's got their own lives and things they have to worry about. But I think it will go a long way for people to just be able to go into conversations with different mills and understand, okay, this is what I should be looking for. What is an environmental impact? What is climate change? What is eutrophication, acidification, all these other environmental impacts? And just asking those questions and just getting that baseline understanding so that, you can make the most informed decision as possible.
Cool. How are the tariffs impacting Metsä?
They are. They're impacting us pretty significantly. Of course, the reduction from 20% down to 10% was helpful for us. But I mean, no, there's not much that we can do. We have to pass those costs on to customers.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. I think you try to strike a balance where you can, but I mean, it's completely out of our control. But we can't lose money hand over foot if we keep our prices the same. So it's a huge hit. We're doing the best we can, and we have great relationships with customers, and they've been really trusting of us. And, we've been really fortunate that they've been patient with us, and they understand that this is a very volatile situation, but it's not good. It's certainly not something that we're welcoming.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the case for everybody, right? Everybody's in the same boat at the moment, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
If we look 5 years ahead, what's the most exciting paperboard innovation that's going to change how designers think about packaging that you're seeing?
I think that it really is the barrier development. I think if we can get to a place where all of our paperboard is produced with 100% fossil-free materials. And of course, I also think that fossil-free production is incredibly important, but I think that's more challenging just given the energy mix that we have in the US. And that's a tough one. But if we can get to a place where we eliminate fossil-based materials in our packaging, our paperboard packaging, and we find really strong barriers made from renewable materials. Seaweed's a big one that's out there right now. Seaweed farming is great because it does sequester a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. So not only is it, you can grow it everywhere and it's basically a carbon sink. But then it has really phenomenal barrier properties. So it's innovations like that, I think, are going to take this industry to the next level. And I'm really anxious, or not anxious. I'm hopeful and optimistic about how this is going to progress.
Awesome. Hey, I got a stupid question for you. It seems stupid to me. You talked about if we take the timber and burn it, right, for energy, it's sequestered X amount of carbon. How do you measure carbon that's been captured in grams, or how do you?
Usually in kilograms of CO2.
Okay.
We look at.
So let's say.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So let's say this tree's captured 10 kilograms of CO2, and then we burn it, and it's going to release 10 kilograms of CO2.
Yeah. So that's a good question. So basically, how we do our calculations, it's called the 0/0 methodology, I suppose, if I never said that out loud, but which basically means that if that tree, that carbon that was sequestered, it's going to be released at the same rate when it is used as production energy. So it's a net equal. So it doesn't get accounted for. Now, we do post our biogenic emissions on our, they're called biogenic emissions. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, versus fossil-based emissions. So we put that all out there. We're very transparent about that. And I think many other competitors do the same thing. I think it's important to ask that question because, I think people see smokestacks or steam coming out of a mill and they're like, well, look, they're burning stuff. There goes all that carbon. Well, it's the same carbon as it was before. And it's the same amount of carbon as it was before.
Okay. So then let's say we take that same tree that's captured 10 kilo, I don't even know if that's realistic, 10 kilograms of CO2. We turn it into a paper. That paper is then composted. In the compost process, like, here's my stupid question. Does it release the same amount of does it release CO2, or is that, I don't know, like, it seems like it'd have to go somewhere, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it's in the soil. So it is sequestered in the soil, or it is, in some other way used by different plants, trees, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
But, as an example, we harvest all of our wood, or most of it. We try to harvest most of it in the wintertime because the ground is hard. If you were to harvest wood in the summertime where the ground's a little more soggy and wet, the depressions that you're making in the soil actually releases carbon because there's carbon that's kind of stored in the soil. So I think that kind of goes to your question, because it proves that, we have that carbon that's put in the soil, and if you kind of dig it up or mess with it, it's going to be released. So when you compost something, that's what happens.
Got it. Okay. And that was my stupid question.
Not a stupid question.
Like I get, we get it. We burn it. It goes away because I can see it as smoke. But if we put it in the ground, like what happens? So yeah, I guess you trap it, but it can get released later.
Sure.
And yeah, so it's like, so when we go to like the seaweed coatings and the seaweed materials, like that's captured a ton of it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that seaweed material is being pushed for composting. So then when you do compost, you are going to release some of that back. So it's not like it's not that silver bullet, right?
Yeah, it's probably not the silver bullet. And I'm sure there's going to be more developments. I mean, you see a lot of kind of coatings that are made from, I saw one it was nanomaterials, which I thought was crazy. I'd read about this recently, and it's like these, I still don't 100% know exactly like what they're made out of, but I mean, there are a lot of different things out there that people are experimenting with, a lot of different chemicals that people are experimenting with. And I think ultimately, if we think about what is going to result in the lowest environmental impact, if we consider all those different environmental impact categories, not just climate change, but effects on water, waste, land use, consider the whole life cycle and everything that should be considered for that product, I think we'll end up in a really good situation, years down the road.
Awesome, man. Nate, thanks so much for hopping on here and talk about sustainable materials and kind of giving like a full breakdown of what you should really consider as a designer and as a brand.